What's your deal? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I was just going to say, I bet you would like it more if you had a theme song for it.
Maybe it's time.
Yeah.
Maybe. Do you want to rap it for us? Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is episode number 7. I'm your host, Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined by my Legion of Doom, Ebony Astor.
What's up, people?
And Carolyn Pettit.
Hello, hello.
This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love, or alternatively, we are the feminist killjoys coming for your media, depending on your perspective. On today's show, we're going to check in with the latest pop culture news, let Ebony wax poetic about Doctor Who and the recent Christmas special that she made us all watch, talk about Carolyn's Game of the Year butterfly soup, and we'll finish the show by each sharing a little something in What's Your Deal? And as always, exclusively for our fantastic drip backers, we'll be recording a bonus segment. This week's bonus segment, we're going to talk about our individual resolutions for our media engagement in 2018. And just one more thing before we get started. Thank you so much to everyone who contributed to our end-of-year drive and helped us reach our fundraising goal. Everything Feminist Frequency does, including this podcast, is 100% listener, reader, and fan-supported. Thank you for helping us stay on the air and on the web. If you want access to special perks and exclusive backer awards, check out our podcast community at d.rip/femfreak. Now, on with the show. Hey, Carol.
Hey, Anita.
Hey, Ebony.
Hello, people.
How was everyone's Christmas?
I don't want to talk about that.
All right. Yay, Christmas.
Yo, I had a great time.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, and it was a nice end to what was just a giant pile of donkey dung of a year. So the fact that I ended on an up note or appeared, I don't know, there's still a couple of days, but the fact that I appear to be ending on an up note, man, I deserve it. Let me just come right out and say I deserve it.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you
do, Ebony.
Thank you.
I had a terrible holiday, but I did get to walk along the beach a couple of times, so I'm going to take that.
Yeah,
that's
a win.
Down in Southern California. It was warm.
Was it like an early 80s boozy saxophone R&B video walking on the beach?
You know, I was listening to that on headphones. I was wearing little what are the bicycle shorts and roller skating on the boardwalk. That was me.
What?
Rollerblading. I was rollerblading on the boardwalk. And okay, whatever.
It took you a long time to get to the word rollerblades, but I'm okay with it because now I want to know why I didn't see any pictures on your Instagram. Hit me up. Hit up my DMs and shoot me some pictures of you and rollerblades.
We'll make that happen. What about you, Carol?
Yeah, I went over to a friend's place for dinner, and they just have like the coolest kids. They have like a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old who are just like so exuberant and playful, and always like so happy to see me. And they just they always want to just curl up and read books with me or whatever. And it's just such a warm feeling going there for Christmas. Yeah,
I taught a 5-year-old how to play Super Metroid and was trying to explain how it's one of the best games ever created, and he didn't care. And he just jumped up and down for 2 hours in one level. And I was like, can I help you? Can I help you move forward? He's had such a lovely time.
Well, I mean, play it.
He got to roll into a little ball and was so excited.
That is super cool. It's still super cool all these years later.
It is. And it's cool to see kids,
learning from their elders.
The things that we grew up on. Yes, that.
I taught my 6-year-old nephew a little too much of the song Bad Babysitter. His mom was about to put me out of the house. So, note to self, kids are little recording instruments. You got to be careful what you say about them.
Seriously, I got to rein in my language around kids. Mm-hmm. All right, so Ebony made us watch the Doctor Who Christmas special.
And you're grateful.
Yeah,
you're
so
grateful.
I have so many Doctor Who feelings. And so what I think is really interesting about this conversation that's about to happen is that Ebony is a hardcore Doctor Who fan who has never stopped being a Doctor Who fan.
That's right.
I was a pretty intense, new Doctor Who fan, and I stopped because I couldn't deal with Moffat and his bullshit, and I thought the show got really bad. So I haven't watched it in years. I haven't seen the new Doctor at all. And Carolyn, I think, has watched maybe one episode or two ever.
But I do have to say, after watching the Christmas special and how fantastic Jodie Whittaker is in it, I am just so excited.
2 seconds of her
I am
in
just
it.
so excited to see where they're going with this character, because what a great introduction.
I'm going to let you stay, Carolyn. This podcast is going to become the Ebony and Carolyn half-hour comedy hour, and Anita has to go sit outside of the studio and think about what she's done wrong.
Wow.
All right. So,
Ebony, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, do we want Ebony to start? How do you feel as like you know the context of everything? What did you think of this Christmas
I can talk
special?
about it all day long, but are we starting with the main segment? Are we starting with the main segment?
Anita launched us right into Doctor Who, so we'll come back around to the entertainment news later.
Okay. Oh, shit! I totally fucked up. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm doing really bad today.
You know what? It's okay. First podcast of the year. We have 51 more to get it right.
All right. Well, let's just do this then. Why don't you give us your thoughts, Ebony, as an old school Who fan?
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Francis stole Pee-wee's bike. Okay, well, first of all, because I was visiting family over the Christmas break, I've only had the chance to watch the special one time. And normally I watch each episode like a smooth 17 times and prepare like copious notes and PowerPoints. But anyways, I loved it. Surprise, surprise. Shocker, spoiler to no one. I loved it. But I think I loved it for, I was worried, for one thing. Peter Capaldi has been fantastic as the Doctor for me. I know for many folks like you, maybe, Anita, who, kind of waxed and waned with your Doctor Who love over, since the eruption of Doctor Who back into our popular culture consciousness. If you came up with like David Tennant or Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi was a real radical departure. But for me, he was a welcome departure. Not that I dislike David Tennant, although I do think he's a giant ham and cheese sandwich minus the bread and cheese.
Hey, don't talk about my dude like that.
Yo, whatever. Anyways, loved Matt Smith. But Peter Capaldi is everything I want in a Doctor. Like, he's just such a throwback to old Who for me.
Yeah.
Like, an older person, and yes, he is a man, but an older person who's kind of irascible and wise, but really wrestling with the weight of what he's done, what the Doctor has done. Because although the Doctor is, first and foremost about kind of protection, right? And non-violent solutions to potentially violent problems, nevertheless, he has been responsible for kind of catastrophic violence himself, whether directly or indirectly. And I loved the way Peter Capaldi as an actor wrestled with that and kind of wore the weight of that in his presentation of this version of the Doctor. So I'm going to miss him. I mean, and I was just a huge Peter Capaldi fan before this. Like, I was a big, thick of it fan, anyways, whatever. So I loved it. But I also loved, in this Christmas special in particular, how you have Peter Capaldi and you had David Bradley playing the first Doctor. And so you have like these two old white dudes, right? And the Doctor's going to regenerate into a woman. So there's this way you're watching it as a fan when you're watching this kind of goodbye to the old order. And I thought that was really smartly done. So I'm wondering how much hand in it Stephen Moffat actually had, even though he's credited with writing it, because I just think like it was such a direct kind of comment on saying it is time for the Doctor to be different.
It shows you the evolution of it too, because like I appreciated where the old Doctor was saying all this sexist shit and the new Doctor was like, no, you can't say that now. And so you do see like how progress is made in the same person.
Right. Yeah. And like, holding yourself to account, to say like, okay, I can't erase who I was in the past. And there may have been some shitty opinions I held and shitty behaviors I engaged in, but I know better now. And it's incumbent upon me to act as if I know better now. And so the fact that we're going to see that, occur, and we're going to see the different way that people react to the Doctor, right? Like in the universe of the show, because the Doctor is now a woman, I'm excited for. I'm super excited for.
Yeah, I am too. Although, to hear you talk about how what Peter Capaldi sort of represented in the Doctor, I don't have any problem at all with the first female Doctor being a kind of youngish, white, attractive woman. But I do hope that just as we've seen all these younger and older men inhabit and portray the Doctor, that we also will see, older women, like, and of course people of color in that role, and that we don't end up with there being sort of different standards for what kind of women can
Right.
fill the role versus what kind of men can fill the role, if that
Right.
makes sense. Like, I want to see a range of women inhabit that persona as well as we've seen such a wonderful range of men over the years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like, so Anita, you haven't been watching the show over the past couple of years. Anita or Carol, you don't watch the show regularly.
Right.
So you won't have seen Bill Potts, who was in this Christmas episode, right?
Yeah,
She
yeah,
was
yeah.
a fucking phenomenal companion. Phenomenal. So you have this woman of color. She's a lesbian. She is outspoken. She's incredibly funny. She's incredibly smart. And so there was a way in which, even though I knew Jodie Whittaker was going to be the 13th Doctor, I was like, oh man, what if there was a huge freak out and it turns out Bill Potts, like the Doctor regenerates into Bill Potts? I would have lost my mind. It would have been so fantastic. I hope we see more of her and more characters like her. One of the things that I really loved about this last season with the Doctor is that there was no kind of romantic tension between the two leads of the show, like the Doctor and his companion. Like that never tickled a particular itch I had. I know tons of fans, particularly of the New Who, loved like the Doctor's relationship with Rose. It bored me to banana soup, but whatever, do you? Or like Amy Pond and Eleven. That's not the kind of relationship I want between the Doctor and his companion, primarily because it's a weird power dynamic, right? Like, I don't like the idea of this 900-year-old alien, like, cruising among, like 20-year-old Earth women. Like, it just doesn't sit right with me. It's like
That's
Edward and Bella in Twilight. It's fucked up.
I was just thinking that too, actually.
It's fucked up.
But that's so I 100% agree with you on that. And watching Bill Potts on the Christmas special, I was like, oh man, I feel like I missed out on this really awesome
she
character.
was so good. You would love her.
I love River Song. Like, I thought I loved what they did with her because she was one, an older woman who was considered sexually attractive and, like a love interest. And she was smarter than the Doctor because they were operating on different timelines or they were crossing timelines in some ways. And so there's just this amazing moment of like, nobody's smarter than the Doctor. And this amazing sassy woman shows up. And like, I adored that story. But I hated what they did to her.
Yeah,
I hated how they resolved her character, and it drove me absolutely bonkers. But I feel like that's a way that I would see a love interest with the Doctor that feels all right and feels, less gross, less pedophile-y.
The introduction of River Song's character back in David Tennant's tenure was such a wonderful mystery because here was this woman who we had never seen before, who was incredibly brilliant, and just enraptured by the Doctor, but had a relationship with him that he did not remember because it had not happened yet. And I kind of wanted it to remain this wonderful mystery. And as she continued to appear in various episodes, the shine kind of, was rubbed off a little bit the more we learned about her, just because of the way that it happened, as you said. It was like the Weeping Angels. Like when we had the Weeping Angels and Blink, it was such a perfect episode. And then the more we saw them, the more you just thought, you know what? You guys did not know what to do with these amazing characters, so put them away.
Totally. Well, so coming back to the Christmas special, I found it kind of boring, and the
Christmas specials, like as art, are like C grade perpetually. Like there's rarely a really good Christmas special.
That's true. That's true. And so I was kind of like, this is not a great introduction for me to come back into the Who universe because I'm like, oh my God, I'm bored and this sucks and I hope it gets better. But also like I don't know any of these characters. I am not connected in any way to them and I don't care about any of them. But I did appreciate that the story, there's a moment where they're like, oh, they're not evil. Where I loved that sort of flipping of it's always an evil thing. It's always an alien that's trying to hurt people. You always have to like save the universe or whatever. And it just being like, no, this is actually a really cool thing that they're doing.
It's a great line when Capaldi says, I don't know what to do when it's not an evil plan.
Yeah, which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
So, okay, we see the Doctor regenerate after, finally grappling with whether he should still live or not after everything that he's been through. And you see Jodie, the new doctor, come up. And so, okay, two things that I want to say here. One is, I don't know if you remember, but when Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor, gets regenerated, he actually, because he has longer hair, he touches his hair and goes, "Oh no," because he thinks he's a woman. Like, they made a joke about it. Like, that's how fucking bullshit Moffat is.
Holy crap.
So actually seeing the Doctor regenerate into a woman, I think means a lot to many of us as fans.
Absolutely.
I was kind of like, okay, so you have your first female Doctor, and she says like brilliant or something, right? And then she pushes a button and destruction happens. And major spoilers, whatever. It's a Christmas special. And I'm just kind of like, so the first female Doctor fucks everything up and loses the TARDIS?
What's important for you to know, Anita, is that this is the way that we get introduced to a lot of the regenerated doctors. There's this kind of, comedy of errors where they flail about the TARDIS or get, violently ejected from it. This happened with, Matt Smith, for instance, most recently. And so their
I don't remember that.
Oh, boy. I have
I don't
review work.
anything.
I have so much review work to do with you, Doctor Who. But so, they fumble around trying to get his or her way, back into the TARDIS. The TARDIS console and, control room gets completely redone for the new Doctor. And so that's kind of like the reboot, So it's like, while they're figuring out who they are, they're figuring out what the TARDIS is and what the TARDIS means. And so it's a funny, way they reintroduce us to the character every time, but it's not specific to Jodie Whittaker. But also going back to what you were saying about Matt Smith and when he regenerated and was touching his hair, it's interesting that you say that because the Doctor constantly talks about wanting to regenerate and be a ginger.
Oh.
And so I read that differently as that, I'm not a ginger yet. I wanted to have red hair. Which I suppose doesn't really make sense because it's not like, he was looking in a mirror and could see that his hair wasn't red, but that's the way I read it because that's a running joke as well.
Interesting. Are you think you're going to watch the show, Carol?
I want to at least watch like the first few episodes with Jodie Whittaker and see, because it's a new showrunner as well, right?
Yeah,
Moffat's out. So I do want to see if it will grab me and if it will make me care about this character and this universe. So
it's going to be a new companion too, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be everybody's going to be new. So that's, it's a really good place to start.
Right.
I suspect that we won't have a regular companion for at least the first few episodes. I think, they're going to kind of play around and have, kind of one-off, companion light kind of things for the first couple of episodes with Jodie Whittaker. But at any rate, Carolyn, you will be watching, at least one episode a month when I come up to San Francisco and I queue it up on the big TV in the office.
All right. What's the typical tenure of a Doctor? Is it 2 seasons?
It varies. You had, Tom Baker, who, ran for several years. But 2-3 seasons. And then I think actors are very conscious, perhaps more than they had been in the past, about being typecast and pigeonholed in a role. And so, it's incumbent upon them to get that, amazing Doctor Who love from the fans, but then get out before it's the last thing you do.
Yeah, and then the only thing you're doing for the next 20 years is showing up at Doctor Who conventions, signing autographs.
Yeah. Exactly, or answering my fan mail.
I am hopeful, though, because on another podcast, Ebony, you mentioned that the showrunner of Broadchurch is the showrunner of that's taking over Doctor Who, and like Broadchurch has so much like progressive values in it that I'm so elated for this.
Yeah,
so
that's
I'm
exciting.
Sure we're going to have regular Doctor Who check-ins on this podcast.
Yeah,
because that's or we'll see how that goes. There might even be a spin-off podcast.
The bonus segments are just going to be me rambling into a mic in my sad studio closet. That's going to be extra special bonus content for the listeners.
It's going to be great. It's going to be so good. Well, okay, so since I missed the pop culture check-in, let's move into Butterfly Soup and come back around to that, because we're
mixing it up.
New year, new podcast style. So, Carolyn, Butterfly Soup, which you made us all play. This is the podcast where everybody made everybody do things.
And I was happy about it.
This is your game of the year. You spoke about it really beautifully on a previous episode.
Yeah, it was my, I guess maybe my what's your deal on the first episode or something, because I just really wanted to spread the word about it, because I think, it's a visual novel game. It's a small game, so there's a real opportunity for it to kind of totally fly under the radar, but I really think that it's something special, and I really want people to know about it and to play it. It's billed on if you go to the itch.io page where the game lives and where you can get it for free, though I encourage you to kick in a little money if you can, because I think Brianna Lee, the creator, the writer, certainly deserves it for this game. It's billed as being about queer Asian girls playing baseball and falling in love. And, which is accurate, that is kind of what it's about, although it's really about so much more than that, because it focuses on 4 girls, Asian girls, mainly in like high school, although you see some of them when they were younger too, but mainly in like high school. And what I think is so, if I'm going to kind of try to pinpoint what makes this game special, it's the amount of compassion that it has for its characters, and how well it knows those characters, because they're so psychologically sort of complex and understandable, but the game really loves these girls, right? These young girls. I mean, you have one character named Min, who is really kind of like tough and feisty and puts on this kind of maybe like hard exterior at times, and she's hilarious at how overboard she will go sometimes in expressing her kind of like determination for something. But you also come to understand like that her parents put all this pressure and all these expectations on her to be a kind of just traditional, stereotypical girl, and to be feminine in her clothing and in her just disposition and everything. And that's just not who Min is. But she has to fight so hard to like assert who she is in her family and in kind of her school and in her world, that you really understand why she has this really kind of tough persona or demeanor that she carries with her everywhere.
Yeah. What do you think of it, Ebony?
I thought it was so great. So again, I was with family over Christmas, and I, snuck away to play the game for a bit, and I was just enraptured by it. And I so wanted to get my 6-year-old nephew in on the game, but I knew he would fall in love with Min and immediately start emulating her. And I was like, I don't need that smoke from your mom when you go around talking about how you want a gun that shoots a smaller gun that shoots knives. But it was so delightful. I loved how distinct each character was, how wonderfully evocative the dialogue was, and specific to their characters. And I just loved, is it Dia? Am I pronouncing it?
Dia. It's Dia. Yeah.
I loved her hesitation and shyness and diffidence, because it's just reminded me so much. Regular listeners will not believe me when I say this, but I truly don't like confrontation, and I hate talking to people. So I really appreciated you being like, oh my God, I will do everything in my power to avoid having to be in the spotlight, having to talk to people. I will walk 10 miles out of my way if it means being alone versus walking 1 mile with someone and having to carry on a conversation. I loved her so much.
Yeah.
So much.
I'm the same way, Dia. We learn that, there's like these little moments of insight into her where we learn things like, oh, if she's at a house visiting people and she's thirsty, she'll just like go into the bathroom and drink from the sink rather than like, because she doesn't know where the cups are and she doesn't want to like ask where the cups are, things like that. And like I would read those things and be like, oh my God, like I would totally be like that. And I think there's a way in which it's a kind of shyness, a kind of painful shyness that crosses over almost into living with like a little bit of shame that you even exist, that you're even like taking up space in the world. Like I got that from Dia sometimes. Like she doesn't really, but but obviously like her friends can help her and she can grow into, and I think baseball and all these things that she's experiencing can help her grow out of that and grow into a more confident person who has a better sense of self-worth. But it's just it's like funny, but it's also like, oh yeah, no, I get it. Like that's, the psychological, again, just the psychological understanding that Brianna Lee demonstrates of her characters and how she reveals it throughout the game, I thought was so great. Maybe my favorite example of that is with another character named Akarsha, who to me is like, so this game I think is the flat out funniest game I've ever played. Like I don't think any other game has ever made me laugh out loud as much as this game did. And Akarsha is a big part of that. She covers everything up with a joke. She's constantly saying things that are meant to make her seem kind of clueless. Like she wants to almost come across as if she's not very smart. But what's amazing is that the things that she says in trying to appear clueless are so perfectly clueless and so like cleverly clueless that it actually comes back around to revealing how smart she is, right? Because she's like, the things that she's saying are kind of brilliant in their attempt to seem clueless, if that makes sense. Yeah. And she even says at one point, like she says, I have to pretend like I don't care about anything because then if I fail, it's not as big a deal. Like I'm but I'm terrified of failure all the time. And if I acted like I cared about things, then failure would be awful. So I just pretend like I don't care all the time. Yeah. And, so it's like, it's these really multifaceted portrayals where you kind of, they're funny and you like, I mean, I grow really attached to them, but there's still like pain and complexity, like, and in some ways trauma, like under that, informing who they are and how they act with each other in the world.
Yeah. When I played it, I was just thinking like, oh, I get why Carolyn loves this game so much. Like it didn't resonate with me as deeply as it resonated with you. And also I think that there's sorry, that sounded weird. Like I think I get just knowing you. Sorry, I know. I was like, but it's just like, like we know each other's tastes at this point, and so I'm like, oh yes, this is totally a Carolyn game, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And I think, we've talked a lot over the years about how important it is to represent other people and other experiences, and that we have to inhabit experiences that we are not familiar with or we don't identify with. Mm-hmm. And so for me, this was very much that. Like, there's none of the characters I really identified with or like saw myself in or any of that, which is totally fine. Like, that's not important to the enjoyment of a game. But what I think something like this does really well is it shows you, like, it helps me understand, like, Dia's character really helped me understand more about like paralyzing shyness. Mm-hmm. Like I am not that person. Like what? Like I've never, whatever. We can talk about like my own social anxieties and how I find people really tiring too, but like in a totally different way. Like if I wanted a glass of water, I would just ask for a glass of water. It would never occur to me. Like I would just start rifling through someone's kitchen, right? Like, so seeing like her internal thought process of oh my God, a new person play dead. Like literally play dead. It is so embarrassing to watch her do that. Mm-hmm. But you're like, oh, you're so like this is so intrinsically core to your existence at this point in your life. Right. And listening to her thought process, I think, is really helpful in understanding how and why she is that way or why she feels that way. And you see that with each of the characters. The game is set up so that you sort of inhabit and play the characters, and so you hear their internal dialogues, and it's a really nice way to do it because you're seeing characters like say dumb things or act aggressive or be the class clown, and then you get a moment to be in their head and in their families, and you see the pressure that they're under. Right. And I think that the creator did a really nice job of that.
Yeah, and I also love with regard to Dia and her sort of. So there's a romance in the game. And, in the end, Dia is sort of able to say, I want to hold hands and cuddle, right? Like, she's not kind of she's not ready for, anything more than that. And the game accepts that. And the game kind of is okay with that. It kind of respects Dia's need to be exactly where she is with herself and, in life with regard to all of that right now. And I just feel like, the game's the other thing I really appreciated about this game is the way that it's sort of compassion for its characters. I feel in a really genuine, heartfelt way bleeds out to the player as well. There's a sort of coda to the game where the characters are kind of taking all these things that they've learned or said to each other, and in a way they're kind of now addressing you, the player, and they're kind of saying hey, it's okay if you're a total dumpster fire of a person and you haven't figured out yet who you are or where you belong, it's don't give up, and I just felt like that the way that it's so sincerely and without any irony, because so many things in media are just so drenched in irony in recent years, and so whenever anything that I feel is really genuine and heartfelt comes along, it's I really notice it and really appreciate it because I value sincerity over irony generally myself. So I just really appreciated that it really reaches out to you as well and kind of tries to spread some of that warmth and compassion and respect that it has for its characters kind of out into to you, the player, and kind of out into the world in that way.
So I appreciated, too, the race component.
Sure.
So it is very specifically about 4 Asian girls / young women. And so you see an insight into this community and the sort of immigrant culture. And as the child of immigrants that totally did that, we came here for you, for a better life, you better do well kind of thing. But I also went to a school that was 40% Asian and a high school. And so I had several friends who were Asian and I saw their families and I saw a lot of this, the pressure of you have to be perfect all the time and you can't have a social life.
Right.
I feel like this was a really lovely way of showing to people who might not be. And again, this was in high school, right? This isn't my experience or my racial background, but it was so oppressive, right? For a lot of my friends, and there was no ability to have be a kid, and
exactly.
and have a little bit of freedom.
Right.
And it's actually so. So I appreciate that it's this combination of race and sexuality and gender that's just naturally intertwined into these lives and these stories because that is their lived experience.
Yeah.
But so as I was playing it, I was like, hey, what is that other baseball thing that I watched recently? Why am
Field
I
of
thinking
Dreams?
of another thing? Yes. No, I remember I watched Pitch on a plane, which is this show that was only one season that was about a black woman baseball player who's the first woman to ever be on a Major League Baseball team with the Padres, and it had fucking Zach from Saved by the Bell.
Oh my God.
It did?
And I never... Yeah, he's the old guy who's, well, not old, but he's about to... His body's not working, but he's
right.
the all-star guy,
Right.
And so... I actually was I wanted to finish the show because I actually enjoyed it when I saw it. So I went back and watched a couple of episodes last night. And there's a whole storyline about how she has to pick whether she wants to do baseball as a teenager or go to a party, or, a dance.
Right.
Right. And it's that same kind of thing where it's it's so oppressive as a kid that you don't ever get to enjoy life. And
I also appreciated that. Okay, well, for one thing, just on a basic level, I appreciated that it was a game about Asian girls, but different Asian identities, right? It wasn't
Right,
just
right.
East Asian, which tends to be Asian is kind of shorthand for East Asian a lot of the time, and so many other people just get erased from the narrative. But also there's this tension between these kids who are growing up in a, very Americanized environment, and the clashes and friction between them and their immigrant parents, but also the profound love they have for them. And it's not just like a wholesale dismissal, like I'm choosing not to embrace, my culture, my background, my family. Like I'm not leaving that behind, but I have to find myself within it, So, like Carol said, it was so honest and human and real. Like these characters just felt so incredibly real to me, and I just loved each one of them and how distinct they all were. None of them felt like mouthpieces, or two-dimensional.
And I just want to end by saying, we're talking a lot about the kind of the depth of the characters and, all these things. But I also want to reiterate for people who are thinking about playing this game, it's really, really funny.
It is.
Like, we're not really talking about that so much, but it's kind of hard to convey that. But I found this game utterly hilarious. And so, it's not like a really serious game. It has seriousness in it, but it's also hysterical.
There's a line that says, "I'll throw all your fish out into the middle of the street so cars will run over them," which I screen capped because I thought that was a very funny line.
Or when Min just like picks up a baseball bat and starts hitting people to get them to move out of her way, you're going to lose it.
Also, shut the hell your mouth.
Shut the hell your mouth. I love it when Min says that. Shut the hell your mouth. Min is so great.
I highly recommend checking it out. It is free, but please, if you can contribute, pay the creator for her work.
Yeah.
And it's just on itch.io. We'll link it in the info. How about we circle back around to the pop culture check-in that I completely missed earlier in the segment.
We're trying a new podcast structure, listeners. Let us know
it's not
what
a
you
good
think.
structure. I just fucked up.
All right. So last week, Netflix released their first kind of attempt at a real, like, true cinematic blockbuster as a Netflix original production. The film was called Bright. It's a $90 million
Oh my God.
film. It stars Will Smith. It's like a, cop action drama with a real high concept. Like, it's set in an alternate present day in which, like, orcs and other fantasy creatures coexist with us here, on Earth, and like always have.
It's terrible. Can I just interrupt right now to say it's terrible?
Did you
I had no
watch
intention of watching it, but my knucklehead brother, who I surprised, I spent my hard-earned American dollars surprising that punk for Christmas, and the first thing he did was cue up this movie. I almost moonwalked back to McCarran Airport. I had enough.
So there's this great excerpt from David Ehrlich's review of the film for IndieWire. He says, "From the director of Suicide Squad and the writer of Victor Frankenstein comes a fresh slice of hell that somehow represents new lows for them both. A dull and painfully derivative ordeal that often feels like it was made just to put those earlier misfires into perspective." But the real important thing about Bright isn't that it's a terrible, massively expensive Netflix production. It's that it was written by Max Landis, who, it seems, his behavior as a sexual predator has been kind of an open secret in Hollywood for a long time. But with the release of Bright and the cultural drubbing, the critical drubbing that it's getting and everything, people are finally, like, really coming out and talking about Max Landis as a truly, like, vile human being. So comedian Jake Weissman, who's the creator of a show Corporate, an upcoming show called Corporate on Comedy Central, he tweeted, quote, "Definitely watch that big Netflix movie coming out, written by that fucking psychopath who is one of the worst people alive." Mike Drucker, who's also a famous comedy writer, responded, "Jake, I have exactly, entirely, 100% no idea of whom you're talking about, but I just hope he doesn't have a powerful father in Hollywood who's covered up for the fucked up shit he's done."
Wow.
A lot, and an actor named Anna Akana, who actually had worked with Max Landis on, like, some YouTube video that Max Landis produced, also tweeted at Netflix that saying, Max Landis has sexually abused and assaults women. Zoe Quinn described his behavior as an open secret and said in a tweet, quote, "My last encounter with him was watching him tell my friend on the night that her ex beat her up that since she's gotten abused before, she should figure out what she's doing to cause all that drama for herself and not to reach out to friends about it on social media." So anyway, obviously, like, everything is still just, there's no actual charges or anything against Max Landis at this point, but it's been super interesting to watch in the wake of Bright's. Like, Netflix has totally positioned it as this big blockbuster, and it's complete critical failure, and, like, all the talk about it is really dominated by talk of how awful Max Landis is. Yeah,
but the thing is, if the movie were good, and, if it were successful, it's very unlikely, I think, that, we'd be having these in-depth conversations about Max Landis and what a dumpster fire he is. So, yeah, fuck that guy. But also, it shouldn't take people not being happy with his movie for him to, for the open secret to actually no longer be secret. I'm so sick of those two words together. I'm tired of hearing about such and such was an open secret. People, if you knew and you had the wherewithal to do something about it, stop letting these fools work. Why are they still collecting checks? Why?
Yeah, a lot of people were, I think, because his father is John Landis, who is a powerful, famous Hollywood director. I think a lot of people were intimidated by the idea of just going up against John Landis, unfortunately. But surely somebody who was in a position of power to do something about this must have known.
And I have to say, I have because I threw out, a request for recommendations for stuff to watch over the holiday break, and several people recommended Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency to me, which I fully intended to check out, having been such a huge fan of the Douglas Adams books. But just learning who Max Landis was and then writing that, he was responsible for this televised adaptation of it, it's going to go in the non-watch pile. There's too many other wonderful media projects out there not created by, nuclear garbage monsters. So,
yes, indeed. Speaking of, I don't know if a nuclear garbage monster might be a little strong, but
someone who needs to have her phone or tablet taken away.
Yeah. So the writer, the celebrated American writer Joyce Carol Oates has been saying some things on Twitter that really don't need to be said. But a little background. So the New York Times recently did a story on sensitivity readers in young adult lit. Sensitivity readers, generally they read, young adult fiction to see if there's sort of offensive stereotypes being perpetuated, if cultures are being portrayed in a negative light, these kinds of things, so that the author hopefully can do the work of amending the book before it's actually, released and put in front of young adult readers. But so the New York Times did a story on this whole practice called Sensitivity or Censorship, the Vetting of Children's Books in an Era of Outrage. A sensitivity reader who was actually mentioned in the article, named Danielle Clayton, she goes on Twitter by Brown Bookworm, quoted the New York Times tweet and was like, hey, New York Times, I'd love to write about how children's book publishing privileges white, cis, het, able-bodied voices and censors the marginalized. Which is a very sensible thing. Like, obviously, yes, the New York Times should talk about this. Joyce Carol Oates, in her infinite wisdom, thought it was a smart idea to quote Danielle's tweet and say, no one should censor writers. Just don't read what offends you. Start your own publishing houses and magazines, as many of us have done. Like, okay, so, oh my God. Thankfully, N.K. Jemisin, brilliant sci-fi writer, kind of schooled Joyce Carol Oates with her own series of tweets that said things like, no one should, quote, no one should censor writers, but if publishing houses do so to marginalize people, then we should just go elsewhere. So basically you're saying publishing houses should continue to censor writers? Does that make sense? Do you even understand the argument here, Joyce? Which she obviously doesn't. Like, no. Joyce, and she doesn't understand at all the power dynamics, the issues of race, sexuality, all these intersections of privilege that she herself is kind of just dismissing out of hand in her tweets.
Joyce Carol Oates, I think, comes from this school, this generation, this kind of, class of artists who, are refusing to let go of the idea that there can be such a thing as, art for art's sake, and that you can, entirely divorce the art from the artist, and that, somehow the cream will always rise to the top, and that, if art is out there to be enjoyed and consumed, that must mean it has some inherent worth. And if it turns out that you just don't know very many Indigenous authors, or if you just don't know very many, trans artists, it's just because they aren't out there producing, because somehow the stuff that you are enjoying has to have somehow made it past, these quality barriers, and that there's no barriers for other people, are reaching that. And it's obviously utter bullshit. But the thing that disturbed me the most, in which I shared with Carol and Anita in our work Slack channel, was this bullshit ass tweet where Joyce Carol Oates says, the story of Othello would be just as moving and effective if you removed the aspect of Othello's Moorishness, or however she puts it, disagree. And luckily, thousands of people weighed in and were like, yeah, hard disagree. You are entirely misreading this, But I think it's so emblematic of the way that many white people do see race, nationality, identity as incidental. As something that can be taken on or put or, taken off, and it's incidental to a person's identity. It's irrelevant in a way. It's like it's set dressing, And I just thought it was such a self-own, because she was really just telling on herself about the way, she sees race and identity. But I was horrified that this writer, whose work I have enjoyed tremendously, has this understanding of art. And I just thought, would she see it the right way, or see it the same way if someone suggested that about one of her pieces, Let's
move on to my favoritely titled segment.
Yeah.
What's your deal? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I was just going to say, I bet you would like it more if you had a theme song for it.
Maybe it's time.
Yeah.
Do you want to rap it for us? Don't you owe us some kind of rapping from last week?
Yeah, but also I find it incredibly racist that you just asked if I wanted to rap it. I said I would rap other things.
Oh, shut the fuck up. Last week you said you were going to rap something for us.
Back me up here.
No, I will pull up the recording.
People have been so focused on the name of our segments, including, crucially, the best segment, What's Your Deal? But spend less time coming up with alternative titles and spend more time telling us what you want to hear. I mean, I literally will rap anything you tell me to rap. I said I would rap covers. Not just random segment ideas. Okay.
No, you didn't.
Carolyn, please go so I have time to simmer down.
All right. So I want to talk just a little bit about live streaming, actually. I don't know, some of our listeners here on the podcast probably know that we have a channel, twitch.tv/femfreak, where we do live streams of video games. We have our normal, Thursday afternoon, evening streams, but I also do a fair amount of my own streams on there. And I did a bunch over this past, week while I was kind of taking a little time off for the holidays. And I just want to say, how much I really enjoy the opportunity to do that, because we've built up like a nice little community of regulars who are really just really great to kind of hang out with, and playing games and having them hang out in our chat just makes the experience of playing games often so much more enjoyable for me, because it lends it a social aspect. It makes I'm sharing it with folks who are funny and warm and happy to be there and supportive, and so I'm grateful to our Twitch community, and I just wanted to maybe say, hey, if you weren't aware that that's a thing we were doing, go to twitch.tv/femfreak and give our channel there a follow, so you can be notified when we do live streams, and maybe you can join us there as well. But I really like live streaming. It's fun.
Yeah, I was, really anxious when we started live streaming like a year or so ago that it was just going to be a dumpster hellfire because that has been our experience.
Sure.
And like, I've been so elated and like really enjoy, like I actually miss when I'm out on the road to not be a part of like the live streams because the community, like you're saying, is just so lovely. Like it's very rare that I'm going to jinx this. I'm not going to go there. But like the regulars that come in, we've like built a rapport and a relationship, and like it's making me want to have more community with Feminist Frequency in general because there's so many amazing, lovely people who engage with our work and who care about these issues. And when you strip away all the harassment, like you can actually have like pleasant, enjoyable conversations.
I know.
It's weird, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Plus, Carolyn is so great. Like, shout out to Carolyn and her many voices. She's like Mel Blanc. She is like. I want Kara to start narrating audiobooks because the joy she takes in putting on different voices for characters is fantastic. It's fantastic.
All right, Ebony, are you?
I'm ready to wrap.
Are you ready to
wrap? What's your deal?
Anymore?
I'm ready to wrap what my deal is. No, my deal this week, you're gonna be so surprised, is a crime drama. So I have started watching Ripper Street. And I believe the final and fifth season... Is that a British show? It is. Again, huge surprise, right? But anyways, I think the final and fifth season aired in late 2016, maybe early 2017. And I just started watching it, so I'm just catching up now. But I'm finding it so fascinating the way that our endless taste for crime thrillers is provoking like all of these kind of new takes on the genre. So let's show a crime thriller series set in the past. Let's set it in this place, whatever. So just the different ways in which we're choosing to tell these same stories. But what I find particularly interesting for me about Ripper Street is, one, I'm always interested in stories that deal less with the kind of rarefied elements of society, so like the aristocracy or, royalty or the higher classes, but instead are dealing with, the working classes and the poor and the ways in which they negotiate life and how things, look and feel and smell different for them. So that's been very interesting for me. One of the things that I wish there was more of, and, I'm not surprised that it's not there, is this continued insistence upon privileging the story of men and how men react to crime and the desecration visited upon women's bodies, but not women reacting to that, So there are ways in which, like, it's standard crime thriller fare, right? There are very, kind of violent or gory or lurid bits where we see dead bodies, but the ways in which they're filmed, these dead women, such that they are telling a story about the crime and about the murderer, but not telling a story about themselves, is really disheartening in a way. And I'm thinking about like the legend of Jack the Ripper, for instance, and how we know the name, or we think about with fascination this character of Jack the Ripper, but it's about the murderer. But how many of us could call to mind the name of even a single one of his victims?
Yeah. Did you watch Mindhunter on Netflix?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Because that's one of the criticisms lobbed at the show as well, that we're deep diving into the minds of serial killers and like learning about their lives and their experiences, but you don't know anything about who their victims were.
Yeah, and so, like I said, I just started watching the show, and so I don't know how the show changes and evolves over the 5 series that it existed. I find the show really fascinating to watch. There's, some really great acting work in it. If you are, a massive fan of crime thrillers like I am, you'll see tons of people who appear in this show, who appear in other shows. So like, the genealogy, like the family tree of European crime dramas, it's like a high school drama club, like it's the same 7 people revolving around in the background of every show. But yeah, so that's what I'm kind of obsessed with right now. I'll probably blow through the rest of the series over the weekend, and then maybe I'll dive into Mindhunter and then want to talk about that next week. Stay tuned, people.
Yeah. So this is a what's your deal that I keep putting on my list to talk about and then keep taking off for other things. So in November, I watched Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond, which is the documentary on Netflix about Jim Carrey on the set of Man on the Moon, which was a 1999 biopic about Andy Kaufman, who was an American comedian and an entertainer. Now, so why this documentary exists is because there was a film crew that filmed Jim Carrey on the set of Man on the Moon, and that was supposed to be like this companion extra that was released with the film. But I think it was Universal, but I might be making that up. Whoever was the studio that produced Man on the Moon said, no way, you can't release this documentary because it was so damning of Jim Carrey. They're like, I don't think people are going to watch this movie. So what the documentary is about how Jim Carrey embodied, so you would say method acting, right? Where you completely immerse yourself into the character you're playing full time. But intermixed with the footage of Jim Carrey on set playing Andy Kaufman, or being Andy Kaufman is interviews with Jim Carrey in present day talking about that experience. And he says that it's not method acting, that he literally embodied this. He was Andy Kaufman. Like, it's so fucking mind-boggling. And so not only did he embody Andy Kaufman, but he also, you know, if you watch the documentary or know anything about him, Tony Clifton is Andy Kaufman's it's a caricature he does, who's this old curmudgeonly man that's super racist, super sexist, just really offensive and like bombast. He's just a big, awful dude, right? So you have you have Jim Carrey on the set of this movie for months being absolutely abusive to his coworker, to the crew, to his other cast members, to the guests that came on that were like on in the movie. He was absolutely horrible to the director, Milos Forman. And so you watch Forman be like, can you not do that? And then realize that he can't stop him and just have to talk to him as if he's Andy. And like, it was just, so the thing is like, you know, I think the point of it is like, oh, how interesting this is process. And like, it's uncomfortable. He was like super abusive to the makeup artists and the hair stylists and stuff. And I watched it being like, you are a horrible human being that just straight up abused everyone on this set. And like, you're a famous actor and you get away with it. And a documentary gets to be made and you get to be like, hey, I did this thing once and it changed my life.
So the documentary isn't itself like super critical of how he was behaving then.
Not super. Yeah. Like, it's hard to not see it because you're watching it knowing that he's like, you see people's reactions.
Yeah.
And you see how uncomfortable he's making people.
Right.
But it's not. It's not celebrating it, but
sure.
it's not intensely critical of it.
And I mean, it lets Jim Carrey himself kind of speak about
right.
like, oh, I was just embodying, you know, or Andy Kaufman.
Meanwhile, Sean Young shows up in a cat suit at Tim Burton's office and then trying to get the role of Catwoman and doesn't work again. Double standard,
actually,
people.
So there's a moment where he, as either Andy or Clifton, goes to like starts Spielberg. I think he goes to Spielberg's office and like causes a fit, like just screaming in the lobby and like makes his way into the office. Like, he doesn't ever meet with him, but it's just like he never stops being this person, and like it's not a good person.
No,
like it's a really, really bad person. And so I think there's questions here about what do we consider genius, who, like, artistic freedom, like at what cost do we allow people to express themselves in these ways. And like, you know, I don't think anyone agrees that like, yeah, he really embodied him. But
there is this sense, I think, and I think it's pretty much only white men who are, that are given this kind of leeway. But there's often the sense of, well, it's out of that assholishness, that cruelty, that abusiveness, that this great art emerges.
Exactly.
So you have to allow these white male geniuses to behave in this way so that we can get that magnificent art.
Exactly.
But it's like, we don't think that, I mean, it's A, that's bullshit, I think, and B, also, it's not like there's all these any woman director really or actor
or person of color, anyone who's not a white
exactly
dude, right?
can ever think of getting away with that.
And the hard thing is that Man on the Moon was a really good film, and he really did embody and he played Andy Kaufman in this way that was really impressive to a lot of people. And so there's this you're kind of rewriting your memory of this film to be the cost of making this thing was not worth the how good it was. So that is my deal this week. That's our show?
Yeah, that's our show.
All right.
Is that a question?
Yeah, it is a question because clearly I'm a bad host this week. All right. That's our show. You can catch us back here every single Wednesday. Once again, a big thanks to our Drip backers. Drip is Kickstarter's brand new subscription-based crowdfunding platform. We are listener-supported, and every dollar you contribute goes directly to producing this podcast. By pitching in, you're joining the FemFreak community. We've got some great rewards for you, so head on over to d.rip/FemFreak and join us. If you like our show, we have a small favor to ask. Please leave us a little review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast. It really, really helps us spread the word about our show and, tell your friends. On Sunday/Monday, Ebony and I are going to restart our Star Trek Discovery Recap Freakcast podcast. So if you're watching that show or if you just want to hear what our angsty rage about how disappointed we are in the show, who knows?
Sell it, Anita.
Maybe the second chapter of season 1 will blow our minds and it'll be incredible. But you can check that out. It could happen. I doubt it, but whatever. So you can check that out and all of our other work at feministfrequency.com. You can find us each on Twitter. Carolyn, where are you at?
I'm at Carolyn Michelle.
I'm at Anita Sarkeesian. And let's find out where Ebony's at this week.
Haha, surprise. I'm at Ebony Aster. Psych!
Wow, you just did that on purpose.
I did.
I see how it is. Our producer is Phil Circus, who also composed... I do this every fucking time. Our producer is Phil Circus, who also composed our theme music. We'll see you all next week.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.